What is the importance of church communications? Why should you have a marketing strategy at your church? We'll talk about it today.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. We're going to have some fun this week. I welcome back my friend Katie Allred. Katie has worked in church world at Brentwood Baptist Church. She is the founder of the Church Communications Facebook group. She's the author of Church Communications Methods and Marketing, which we'll talk about today. She's a great friend, and today we're going to take a deep dive into why you need communications. Why do you need a strategy at your church or for your church? Why do you need to market your church to your community? We'll talk about the difference between traditional and church marketing. We'll talk about branding for your church, creating your logo, tips for your email marketing, and more. My conversation with Katie is on the way. At 1230 Media, we are on mission with churches and ministries to help you visually communicate the gospel to your audience. We want you to see life change happen through salvation and discipleship at your church. One of the great churches that we serve is Church at the Crossing in Indiana. We are in the trenches with Pastor James Roberts, Tim Lucas, and the great team at their church. We've created dozens of custom visuals for Church at the Crossing, including sermon series graphics, sermon bumpers, and more. Their team knows that to reach the people they want to reach, their visuals matter, and yours do too. If you're a ministry leader with no creative team or your team is overloaded, we can help. You can learn more at 1230media.com/custom. That's 1230media.com/custom. Hey guys, today I welcome my friend Katie Allred. Katie is the founder of churchcommunications.com. She manages the Church Communications Facebook group. She works for Meta or Facebook. She's the author of the new book, Church Communications Methods and Marketing. And there's also a rumor going around that I am her favorite interviewer. She loves me. We're best friends. Katie is here to set the record straight. Katie, true?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Nobody else has claimed it, so you can claim it. Why not?
Well, I want the spot. I want the spot of the most hard-hitting, fun, engaging interview that you'll do this quarter.
I hope so. Yeah, I think it might be the only interview I do this quarter, honestly. So
I don't know if that doesn't prop me up. I'm going to edit that out. We're going to edit that line out. I'm just kidding. Thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate the time.
You've got an exclusive, Carl. I'm not doing this for everybody.
That's right. Paying the big bucks.
Also, I like that we're both wearing green this morning. I think that the people who are listening to this won't know that we're both wearing green, but I think they should know that.
Well, I appreciate you texting me this morning and saying, hey, for the interview today, I'm wearing a green shirt, if you don't mind.
Also wearing green. Yeah. And that way, you can release this on March 17th on St. Patty's Day and people will love it.
That's right. I could do that. Thinking ahead. As one church communicator would do. All right. Yeah. So let's dive into the book. Tell me, you have sold out. You've done great with this book. It's about time you write it. So tell me how the book came about for you.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious that it sold out. I think it's hilarious that anybody wants to listen to me, honestly. But the book came about because of the Church Communications group. I started in 2015, and I was working in church comm at the time. I have always loved church communications ever since I was a kid, really, growing up in the church and staring at the bulletin with multiple fonts and thinking, wow, that's a lot of fonts. It was a fun game for me to play of how many fonts were there in the bulletin this week. So I think that I just always kind of had a knack for it. It's something I really enjoyed. And then figuring out from there, like I went and taught marketing at a university and really enjoyed teaching marketing after I worked at the church. And when I was reading the marketing book. And when I was teaching marketing, I realized that there's a lot of these principles that churches don't know or learn because they go to seminary, right? Like pastors go to seminary, they don't go to marketing school. And that's great. That's fine. But there's plenty of like just really basic concepts that I feel like a lot of churches should know. They should at least know the phrases for the words and how those strategies, like basic strategies, work. Like house of brands versus a branded house, or things like that are often asked in the group. So I said, let's just put it all in a book, and that's what happened.
Yeah, well, you've done a great job with it. So let's kind of start from the start as it comes to and relates to churches. So talk to me about the importance of church communication. Why is it needed today? Why, as a church staff, should we be paying attention to the communications team?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people have asked me this question, and I've almost always said, well, it's not that important, but it's incredibly important. Like your church having a logo really isn't that important at the end of the day. Like it is important, but it's not important. Here's the thing that is the most important. The gospel is for everyone, and the gospel should go forth in every possible way, in every medium that exists, and print and the web and all of that exist. And it exists typically in the forms of marketing. And so your church should be where the people are, and the people are on social media, and the people are on the internet, and the people are watching live streams and listening to podcasts like they are right now. And so if that's the case, then church should be there. So that's why I think church communications in general is important. Now, do I think your church will cease to exist if it doesn't have a social media presence? Absolutely not. Like the church I grew up in doesn't really have one. They don't have a logo. This church has been around for 200 years and will continue to serve its community really, really well. I think that what you can do is do some things really, really well. And I think that church communications can help that and facilitate further growth.
Yeah. So for, let's say, more traditional churches listening for right now, what's the difference in traditional marketing and church marketing? Explain the difference between the two.
Well, there really isn't. I mean, there really isn't a lot of difference. I think that when it comes to like the 4 Ps, right? So like in traditional marketing, there's the 4 Ps, sometimes the 7 Ps, depending on, how you're feeling that day. But the 4 Ps are like product, price, place, and promotion. And so for a church, you don't really have a product and a price, right? Like, unless you say like the product's Jesus and the price is priceless, So, just not really, that's not really a thing that we think of. And so a lot of times like our product is an event, like maybe it is Sunday morning, right? And then like, where is it happening? Like that's the place. And like, how are you promoting it? Like, are you posting about it online? Are you sharing it with friends? Are you getting, business cards for people to hand out, those kind of things? Those are the 4 Ps that kind of go into it. And the price might even just be the budget of how much it costs to do a Sunday morning even. Right. And so I think people tend to like get those two things mixed up when it comes to like corporate marketing and like church marketing. They're very similar, but it doesn't exactly fit. So you kind of have to like figure out how exactly you're going to translate it.
So if I'm a church that's looking to kind of push reset on my strategy, my marketing strategy, what, maybe define that? What is a marketing strategy, and give me an overview of maybe some things that I should think about when developing a strategy for my church.
Yeah, so thankfully there's a whole plan in the book, but some general thoughts is really thinking about who you're trying to reach. I hate to say there's a saying about like a business for everyone is a business for no one. And I often think about that in like a church context. And I know that that's, people don't want to say that's true, because they're like, well, our church is for everyone. But the case is, it's probably not. You know, some people love liturgical worship services. Some people love contemporary. Some people want people to yell at them the entire service. Some people don't want that, you know, and there's something for everyone. That's across the board. That's fine. Like, we're not mad at it. But the thing is, you have to figure out, like, what is that target demographic? So who exactly are you trying to reach? Are you trying to reach Gen Zers? Are you trying to reach millennial home buyers? Like, the thing is, and like, are you trying to reach young families, essentially, is what you're saying when you say, I want to reach millennial home buyers for the most part. Or are you like in an area where there's a lot of like young career people who maybe don't have families exactly yet? There's so many like core and key demographics. I think like researching like who you're trying to target is probably the most important thing to begin with. And then two, like, if you're just like, if you're resetting, so you're a church and you've been doing this for a while, I think just doing a survey is like a really important thing to do. There's actually like a sample survey in my appendix or whatever, but like, I mean, just search for a church survey, you'll find one. And I think having just the input of your congregation now will help you realize where you are and then where you can go, because they're going to really tell you like if they're using TikTok or not, right? So like asking them, hey, are you using TikTok? Then you can figure out if you should be on a different platform or not. You know, do you prefer email or text? Right. I think these are all some just general questions you can ask.
Right. Good. Yeah, I agree with you. I wonder if you know, if you talk to any church, they're probably going to say, yeah, we want to reach young families. And I think the reason why is because they want to seem vibrant and growing and not like a dead church. But I don't see anything wrong necessarily with if you're after 40s, 50s, 60-year-olds, that's fine. Like, just be that. That's quite all right. I think
everybody needs to serve someone.
Right. And I think the problem is when you are actually a church of 40s, 50s, 60s people, but you say we want to reach young families, but you're not willing to do anything to do that or make the changes to actually do that, then I think there's a disconnect. Would you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I said, there's a church for everyone. It may not be your church specifically if they are a young family and you don't really have a children's ministry. And you might say like, well, we really want a children's ministry. That's why we're trying to reach young families now. Like, we really want this we once had a vibrant children's ministry. That's fine. I think like, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can approach that. Like, I think church revitalization is its own talk in itself, honestly, that we could go into. But I think that, you know, there is a church for everybody. And I think I grew up in a very traditional church, and it's still very traditional, and it's serving the people in that community really well, and has a youth group and does all the very traditional youth group things. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's great. I came to know Christ in that kind of like environment. There's nothing wrong with that. And I love it and I celebrate it. I don't go to that kind of a church now. I'll go to more of a contemporary church, but I think that's for everyone to figure out and decide for themselves, right?
Good. All right, let's talk about branding. What is branding, and why is it important to my church?
Yeah, so I already said, like, if your church doesn't have a logo, like, it doesn't really matter. Which, I mean, like, it is true. Like, I mean, I grew up in a church that does not have a logo, still doesn't. Like, if you look at Mulberry Baptist Church in Maplesville, Alabama, you're not going to find a logo or anything. Although I think I did make them a website once, but it hasn't been updated. So you can blame me for that. That's my bad. But, you know, I think that, like, having branding gives it a consistent voice and style in a community that helps it be recognized. And I think that's the important part of it. Do I think that like your church is going to live or die by its brand? Probably not. Like, the truth is that it's really a brand can encase more than just a logo. And I think a lot of people leave that part out. They just think it's just a logo. But often it is the sentiment of how the community feels about your church. And so that is also a part of branding. I think a lot of people leave that part out of it. They don't think about how like the community feels about it, like taglines go with brand. If you're a cereal box and you have a character on it, that's branding. Even the the Netflix, sound that starts at the beginning, that's branding.
Right.
And so there's a lot more things. Maybe there are certain things that your pastor says that may go into branding for your church. So like my pastor at the church I worked at for several years always said, hear it, believe it, and live. And that, like every time he like read the Bible, and that became kind of a tagline, and like it became a part of the branding of the church because it was something he always said. So it's not necessarily just a logo. So hear me say that. I think logos are important because I think that they help tie things together really nicely. I think that they also help people recognize the church quickly and like what the church is doing. If you're out in the community and you have shirts on and you're doing work, like of course it's going to be helpful if you have a recognizable brand.
Right.
But at the same time, branding's more than just a logo.
What about naming my church, which kind of coincides with that, especially if I'm starting from scratch and either resetting my brand, rebranding, or maybe this is a church plant situation too. What are some tips on naming my church?
Yeah, so there's actually a book, like a naming your thing book, which I kind of quoted, and I asked the author if I could quote some of it in the book. But essentially, it's really hard to name something. It's really hard to name something today. I mean, let alone naming a person than naming a church. And so if you're thinking about it, what I would really do is sit down and just write down, have like a group of people that you really trust, and write down all the possible names. Like brainstorm, write down all the icky names, like write down everything that you can think of, action, verb, church, or whatever that you can think of. And maybe even consider, like, do you want the word church in your church's name? Do you not want to call it church? There's so many different things. There's so many different approaches. It was interesting when I was going back and kind of doing the history of how churches name themselves. Like I was thinking about like Saddleback, for example, was a Baptist church, was planted as a Southern Baptist church, but didn't include Baptist in their name because they didn't think that would help reach Californians. Right. And they were right. And it was such a guess for them, I think it was like the late 70s, 80s. So I think it's really interesting to think about like, how does a name also affect a community? And like, do they like resonate with it? I think you really should, again, after you've come up with these name choices, go back and do some lovely voting. The thing is, like, people like make fun of voting in the church, but it really is very helpful. So,
yeah, to know. All right, you mentioned earlier a house of brands versus a branded house.
Yeah,
give me the difference between the two.
Okay, so a house of brands is like P&G. So like they've got Tide and Gain. I mean, there's like multiple things. Like they've got all sorts of different brands, like Cascade, like anything that you can think of fits into P&G. But
have you been doing your laundry today? Is that what?
Yeah, well, I love P&G's commercials for like, I don't know, like their random branded house commercials are always like very inspirational. There's one about kids learning how to overcome, and it's about moms and like how they celebrate Mother's Day. Somebody should look this up. It's on YouTube. It's like P&G Mother's Day. It's very inspirational. I love that commercial. But anyways, so there's like a house of brands, and then a branded house is more like FedEx Go. FedEx like has FedEx Go and FedEx this, and FedEx that. I'm trying to think of some other ones too that are more off the top of my head, but you got one? Do you have a favorite branded house?
Not off the top of my head, but I definitely, understand the difference. So if it's one brand with multiple sub brands versus a house that has multiple brands,
yeah. So
they're different.
Yeah. So if we want to break it into like church terms, right? So we might have, okay, so I think my church that I grew up in and then the church that I worked at are really good examples. Okay, so the church I grew up in was a house of brands, technically. Although, would they say they were brands? Probably not. But they were a house of brands. So it was Mulberry Baptist Church, and then the children's ministry was called Little Stars. The youth group was called The Loft. The senior adult ministry was called Forever Young. Okay, so we've got like all these different brands, right? They're not Mulberry this, Mulberry that. Right. So the church I grew up, the church I worked at was Brentwood Baptist Church, and it had Brentwood students, Brentwood adults, kids. Brentwood senior adults, and so it was very clear what it was serving.
Right.
Whereas if you went to Mulberry and you heard, hey, join us for Little Stars afterwards, you might be like, oh, this is like a great place for me to get involved in acting. And like, you may think like this is an amateur acting theater group. And you might be surprised to find out that it was not.
Yeah. Campuses might be another example too. That if, which some people have that model where it's a totally different name, even if it's another campus.
Yeah.
But some churches have it where it is, Brentwood East or Brentwood this city or whatever.
A lot of them name their campuses completely different things, and then they end up having like a house of brands instead of a branded house.
Yeah. Which one do you prefer?
It depends on the day and the church. I used to always say, oh, branded house for sure. I used to always say, well, but the only reason I said that was because of the clarity sake of it.
Right.
So like, I would rather you be clear than cute if possible. So like saying Brentwood students was very clear that this is for students. Right.
And it's a part of Brentwood.
Right. So very clear. That's exactly what it's about. Whereas the Loft, you're like, I don't know who's involved in that. It seems like a place, not a
ministry
group of people.
Right.
So that is where like the confusion comes in. Now, here's the thing though. I think people can do like these branded ministries very well and do them very well. So I'm not going to say that that's not going to be ever okay.
Right.
Because I just don't think that's the case. I think I do have like a preference towards like calling it what it is.
Yep.
But I don't say that that's necessarily always the right choice.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. All right. So let's move to digital marketing. Define what digital marketing is for me.
It's marketing on the internet, typically.
Why does it matter? Why should my church be involved in digital marketing?
Yeah, because, well, Jesus told us to go to the ends of the earth, right? And now you can go to the ends of the earth, right, in your living room, which is insane. And I don't think it's just for some people. I do think it's for everyone. I don't think it's just for the church to do. I think it's for everyone in the church to do. And I think digital marketing can be a part of that because you can spend, a few dollars if you want to, or you can spend some time. Either way, you're making an investment either in time or money and reach so many people with the gospel. And I think that's what's really important.
So if I were to build a content strategy for my church on what I should release where, what kind of content I should release, how should I go about crafting that strategy?
Yeah, I think the first step, again, would be going back to that survey and asking exactly like, what your congregation likes now, because those are the people you're trying to reach. Like the people like them are the people you're trying to reach. And so figuring that out. And then two, like if you already have social media, then going into your insights, going into your analytics, figuring out what's working and what's not working, and really taking a critical look at it and saying, there's no golden cows here and anything can go. I think a lot of churches really struggle with that. They want to keep their morning devotional every Monday and find that many people aren't really looking at it. And so it may not be worth doing anymore, or it might be worth moving to another time. Maybe there's a better time where more people are. Or
a different delivery method. Maybe it's not a newsletter. Maybe it's a video on YouTube, or maybe it's a breaking up into a tweet thread or whatever that might look like.
Right. Or break it into multiple reels. Like there's plenty of ways that you could approach this, it is just looking at it a little bit differently. But when it's time to like really come up with a content strategy and come to the nitty gritty, honestly, after you've looked at the analytics, you've done your research, you really just got to sit down and start plugging away like into a Google sheet, right? Like you got to really just start looking at the months and when the church calendar falls and what's happening in the church. I think a lot of people treat social media, especially, as a billboard. I've said that many times, but like, or they treat it as a place just to post events. Like this event's coming up, this event's coming up, this event's coming up, which is fine. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that because I often check social media for events.
Right.
Like if I want to go to my favorite, there's a bakery here in town. If I want to go to my favorite bakery, I'm probably going to check their Instagram to make sure they're open that day. So I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. I do think that social media is a conversation. So how can we start more conversations? It's by asking good questions and posting content that is compelling and different and helps reach the people that you're trying to reach specifically.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't think a billboard is bad, meaning also to translate this, I don't think that scheduling your content on a Buffer or Hootsuite or something like that is bad. But I also think that you need to really lean into the interactive. Use that as a conversation starter.
Yeah.
But get in there and interact and be social on social media.
Yeah, for sure. Be social, right? It's like the rules of kindergarten. Like in order to have a friend, you have to be a friend. So in order to like make more friends on the internet or to get more followers, you've got to interact with people and have conversations. That's the thing. Even if you're an entity, the organization should be engaging with people. So that is commenting back, liking back. If somebody comments, say thanks or that's awesome or that's great. Like any kind of, I don't know, where it's like actually conversation and not just a one-way interaction. That's the way I think the church should be regardless. Like the church shouldn't just be the Sunday morning where the pastor is a one-to-many. It's a many relationship. That's a church to begin with.
Kindergarten Lessons with Katie Allred. That's our new show.
Okay, great. Sounds fun.
All right, let's get into email marketing. Give me some tips on sending emails. What should I focus on? How many are too many? What should I include?
Send so many emails. No, just kidding. Well, here's the thing though. Like, how many emails are too many emails? That's a great question. I don't know that there's an answer. I think like 4 emails a day is too many. But I think it really is up to your congregation at the same time. Like how they like to be like communicated with is important. And I think asking that in that survey again is really important. Like how many times do you want to be communicated with? And so most churches find that a weekly cadence is pretty normal for their email marketing. The church I attend now has a weekly email, and I honestly refer back to it quite frequently because there's notes in there of when things are and what's coming up and like if there are needs that we need to help meet. So I find that that's really helpful. If the email is just, it's funny because I used to be like a huge plain text girl. Like I used to be like, just a plain text email. Nah, I don't want that anymore. It's so funny. Like I actually do prefer like graphic, some text, graphic, some text.
So
like,
you go
I want
back
the
and
graphic.
forth?
And I want that graphic to have like the information on when it's meeting and why it's meeting and like all this kind of stuff on it. And I used to not be that way. And I think that was because I was a communicator and I was the one having to make the graphics or whatever.
Right.
And I was like, I hate this. But like now as just a person who attends church, I'm like, this is great. Thank you so much for sending me this email. I think about it all the time. So I don't know.
It is interesting how different emails perform. A lot of the times, what we've seen in our ministry is a plain text email works better and has more traction and impact than a more graphical email.
Yes.
So we do both.
Yeah. But do you think there's a difference in when and why you should do both? Like, I think a letter from the pastor as a plain text email, great.
Yep.
I think an email that talks about a whole lot of events, it should probably not be a plain text email.
Correct.
So it just kind of depends on the content. Like, if you're
Yep.
getting like an email that's just from one like minister that's explaining some things that are going on in the church, like fine, plain text is great, because you're right. The open rate's usually really great in plain text emails. Who knows why? But the graphical emails I feel like are better for explaining multiple things.
Right. I think it also has to do with, like, if we were to send a full graphical email every single time, it would come across way too salesy and less relational, whereas the text emails can come across relational. And I think with me personally, I don't mind getting a salesy email every once in a while, but I don't want to be inundated with that every single time. And so I think that's probably true with most folks, is if you could change it up on me, I won't get as desensitized to it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, let's talk more social media. How do I evaluate my social media channels? Give me some. What should I be looking at in the stats to make sure that it's working, and where should I pour my energy into?
Yeah, for the longest time, I think people really thought the number of followers was it. But here's the thing, like, most churches aren't going to get thousands upon thousands of followers, because they're, like I said, the church just isn't for everyone. But you will reach people that you are trying to reach. And that's good. That's like what we want, you know? And I think too, you want to create content because you're trying to reach those people who are far from Christ, that are looking for this kind of content that your church is creating. And you're creating content, I think, for your specific community. I think that's a missed opportunity for a lot of churches, is that they're not creating content that's really for their community, as in they're featuring businesses in their community, people in their community, talking about the people in their church, talking about stories of life change, those kind of things. But when you're evaluating which one you should go to, honestly, like, don't just look at the follower numbers, because that's easy to do. I think really look at where are the most conversations happening, and like where are you actually seeing the fruit, right? Like, are you seeing people actually come to church because of the work you're doing in this? Or are you seeing people come to know Christ? Are you seeing people come to your online service? I think that's where I would put the most effort, is where the most conversations are happening, not just where the most eyeballs are being seen necessarily, but where like you're actually having some kind of fruitful conversation.
Yeah, I think I don't subscribe to the notion of if I don't have more than a few likes on something, that's not necessarily a good measurement for me. That doesn't mean that people don't see it. That doesn't mean that people aren't being informed or even interacting with it, even if they don't comment or like. How many times do we listen to a podcast, radio show, watch a YouTube video, and never watch it, but don't interact with it? You know, first time caller kind of situation, long time listener, first time caller kind of situation, where I do that. You know, I'll watch all kinds of stuff on different platforms, that they could probably see my view, but I might not comment, or I might not like, I might not, add an emoji to it, every single one. So I agree. I don't think your follower count or even your viewer count necessarily should determine whether you should still continue something or not. Should you be online as a church? Yes, you should be. If you only got 2 views on your YouTube sermon, should you continue to be online as a church? I think you should be. Yes. Now, do we want to grow that reach? Okay.
Yeah, but, and there are plenty of ways to do that, right? Like, if you're telling me, okay, my church is only getting 2 views on our YouTube, well, like, what are you naming the sermon, right? Like, are you naming it March 2nd, 2023?
Right. .17.mov?
Yeah, like, if that's it, then, like, of course you're going to get 2 views, because it's the person who's specifically looking for March 2nd. Like, who's like, I missed that church Sunday and I'm going to go back and watch it.
Yeah.
But like, if you create it to be a little more evergreen, if you will, or like help give it some keywords. So like, this is a sermon that happens to be on marriage and happens to be on having conflict in marriage, then like writing a like how to have healthy conflict in marriage is going to be a more clickable and searchable thing on YouTube than March 2nd, right? Like, so, because if you just type, we don't know what's in there, we have no idea. It could be on anything.
Right.
And so, but having a sermon title that's really clear and then writing in the description what it is, even if maybe you even get a transcript of the sermon and you copy like a portion of that transcript, maybe like some quotes and put them in the description, just so there's more words for it to search against. I think that's really helpful to help people find it more often. I guarantee you'll get more views than just 2, at least.
Right. Good. I do think that there are some metrics that we should measure. You mentioned this in the book: audience size, post reach, engagement, website traffic. Yes, those are some things that we should track. But I do think that people get so caught up in, I'm not saying we don't want followers. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that sometimes people can get so caught up in the numbers that they miss the mission of what God is calling them to do sometimes. Did I say that right? Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I think, and I mean, I think I said that at the beginning, like how many followers you have, that it doesn't really matter. Right. It matters the content you're putting out. It matters the conversations that you're having because of the content. It matters that you're reaching the people in your community specifically. Are you creating some kind of positive impact? Are you creating a positive change in your sphere of influence? I think that's really important. I think a lot of churches really miss out on the opportunity of really creating positive impact specifically in their community. I think a lot of churches, especially now, are thinking very wide. And like, don't get me wrong, I do think we need to think very wide. I think there are some churches that are really capable of going very wide and need to reach the far ends. That's the whole point of the internet. It's to reach the far ends of the earth. Right. But I think there are many local churches that do such a good job right now of loving their communities well. And they don't even know how to get started on social media. And they could do social media really well by doing what they're already doing, which is loving their community really well and doing interviews and stories of the people in their congregations about how God moved in their life, a time when they trusted God, a time that was hard, but they came to rely on God. You know, those kind of stories of life change are what changes people and the perception of churches and Jesus in general. Is the story of how God moved in your own personal life, right? And so, because like I've always said, life change happens in the context of relationship, and you can't have a relationship with someone if you're a faceless entity. And I think having these faces really does help change the branding of the church even. And so the more you can feature the people of your church and then also the people of your community, then I think that's a win for me.
It is for me too. Should my church pay for social media marketing?
Ooh, good question. I think it depends. So I'm not going to say no, because I do think that, like there are definitely instances where it makes a lot of sense to pay for ads. Like if you're doing a special event or you've got, Easter coming up and you would like to see higher numbers, you would like to reach more people in your community specifically. Maybe you're trying to reach people who just moved into your community. There's so many different ways that you can reach and target people with ads. I do think it makes sense to spend money on ads, but I think you need to make a plan for it. I don't think you should just like boost a post and like have absolutely no targeting, just say everybody around this area. I don't know. Or like most of the time I've seen some ads that they don't even target like an area. It'll be a church like in Minnesota and like they're targeting me. And I'm like,
right, everybody. Yeah.
Or like, I think the worst thing a church can do is target more Christians. And I mean, if you have an event that is for Christians, like that makes sense, right? But like Easter isn't just for Christians, like Easter is for everyone. And so maybe you should be targeting people who are far from Christ for that kind of a thing. Whereas like there was an event we did at our church called Helping Without Hurting. It's like one of those, it's a book. It's very missional. It's very much a Christianese churchy thing. Well, I targeted Christians in the area because I knew other people of other churches might want to come to this event. So that made sense to target other Christians. But I think that most of the time we do a really terrible job of just trying to reach people like us. And so how do we reach people that aren't exactly like us is a more difficult thing to do. But I think just targeting and making sure that you're targeting your community specifically, like within maybe 10 miles even, is probably the best thing you can do, the best way you can spend your money online.
Yep. All right, couple more quick topics for you. Let's talk church websites. I mean,
I
why
love
should
websites.
you like a website?
Yeah, I like websites.
I do too. So
Yeah.
let me hit you with this one. Should I hire a developer to develop my website, or should me as a church, should I use a modular service like a Church Co or Subsplash, Tithely, something like that? Which one should I go with?
That's a question for the ages, Carl.
Well, that's why I
And
ask the good ones. That's why I'm your favorite.
which one is my favorite?
No, I'm saying that's why I'm your favorite.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because I asked the good
That is
question.
why you're my favorite. Which one is my favorite though when it comes to website building? It's building my own. Which is
me too.
Just a glutton for punishment. Like that is why.
Right. But it's more customizable. I mean, I it probably, for me, it depends on how big you are and how much money you want to spend.
But I also have a master's in web development. So I feel like I should preface that.
You should probably do your own, yeah.
That I could probably do my own because I literally have a master's degree in it, but also I've been building websites since I was like a child. So a little different than like somebody who's like been charged with making a website and they don't know what they're doing at all. So if that's the case, if you've been like told to make a website and you have never done it before, I think the builders are a great choice. Like I think those specifically made for churches like the Church Co, great choice because they've got good support and they know what they're doing. They probably already have all the features that you need. They probably have all the connections you need to like all the various CHMS systems, church management systems. So like, I recommend that if you're a beginner.
Right.
If you're a small church too, I recommend that. I'm not going to recommend that you build your own website if you're a small church. I recommend finding a builder and sticking with it. And I think a lot of small churches will say, well, we don't have a lot of budget, therefore we should build our own. But actually, you'll find out that the time it takes will end up being more of an investment. Like your youth minister, if you make your youth minister do this, he's going to spend so much time, or she is going to spend so much time trying to build a website because they have no idea how to build a website and not into your youth ministry like they probably should be spending. So Church Co will like set it up for you and everything, which is really nice. I mean, there's lots of different services, whichever one you prefer. That's great.
It's going to look nicer too, I think, because there's a design eye and an aesthetic eye that those guys are thinking through also. Do you have a platform preference if I do create my own? Should I be on WordPress? Should I be on another platform?
Yeah, well, everybody has a lot of feelings about that. I personally still really love WordPress, but I've been a WordPress user since the early 2000s, since it really started. Before that, I was using like Cute PHP, which is like a predecessor to WordPress because WordPress is also built in PHP. And I like WordPress because it's so flexible. It has so many plugins. It has so many themes. You really can build whatever on top of it. It's really nice because it's open source and it's free. But there are some other ones that have come up on the market recently, like Webflow, that are really good and are worth looking into. I don't think there's an issue. I think WordPress has a lot of security vulnerabilities at times, and a lot of churches are not prepared to deal with what that is. And so, or they don't know how to like set up their firewalls and whatnot.
I would not suggest you create your own website without using a developer. I would not suggest a church going in there and trying to figure out WordPress. I would get a developer involved.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. Make sure that developer has lots of backups. The thing is, like, and they'll know, a developer will know to have backups, or a developer will know to have firewalls and protection and those kind of things.
And how to do all that.
Whereas you will not know to put a DNS There's so many intricate things when it goes into a website. So definitely use a developer or use a builder.
All right, last topic for you. Give me some tips on leading my communications team. So should I hire everyone in-house? This can be communications. It could be also design and video. Should I hire in-house? Should I use an outsourced team, an agency? What should I do when it comes to those things?
I think that's totally dependent on your church again. I think that there are some mega churches that have in-house teams and they're great. But I do think that most churches probably don't need an in-house team and probably can outsource it. I do think having 1, 2, or 3 people, depending on the size of your church, at least having one person and maybe some volunteers is really helpful, because like capturing in-person moments just isn't going to happen with an outsourced team.
Correct.
So like taking photos and recording video and all that stuff, it's just not going to happen if you're only using like one outsourced graphic company.
Right.
However, I do think that having that at your, like as a resource at your, when you need it it's really good. And I think it's really awesome that there are services available now to do that. So I think there are churches that are peeling back some of their communications teams and realizing they could outsource some of it. And actually, maybe they're not even reducing staff. They're just reducing the time their staff is spending on certain projects so that they can spend more time in person, getting those in-person experiences, and then outsourcing just the creative parts.
Correct. We recommend that all the time. If folks come to us, we want them to do their life change stories.
Yeah.
And anything that only you can do. Spend time with your volunteers. That's something only you can do.
Right.
When if you're, back in your office fighting with Photoshop or After Effects, not what you need to be doing. Right. You need to be spending time with your people. Not something we can do. Your sermon graphic, we can do. Go spend time with go have coffee with a volunteer, that sort of thing. Or capture that life change story and then send it to us to put the purdy on it, to polish it. That's another route that people might use an agency for. Okay. How about communication requests, communication calendars? What are some tips on having my communications team be effective?
Well, the thing is, like, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and a lot of people think they're the right way, and that's great. I do think that having some kind of form is really helpful. Having some rules around that form also really helpful. Like, you can't put in a communications request within 24 hours. Like, we don't have 24-hour turnaround here, especially if you're one person, right? Might be you can only do this but like 2 weeks out or 6 weeks out, or however like the rules are around it. And then too, like when you're planning a communications calendar, like I said, like, and I didn't know there was a content calendar. I think this goes into your content strategy. I think what would be really smart and advantageous of you and the ministries of the church is to take some time and actually map out the calendar for the year and put like, maybe go around with Post-it notes, right? And you've got like maybe a calendar of each month, and go around Post-it notes and say, this is like when this event is going to happen. And that way you can be like, all right, well, 6 weeks from that date, you need to have all your stuff turned in.
Right. Or
or maybe it's 3 months before that date so that we can start like really preparing for it. I mean, I think like Easter obviously comes up every year. It needs to be prepared for like the minute, probably right before Christmas happens. You need to start preparing for Easter. And so, and then Christmas, even like you start preparing that for in August, but then church is ramping back up in August. So it becomes like this perpetual beast I think we've all lived with. But there was all these little events that happen in between that are really important too. So I think having all your ministries to get together and actually put things on the calendar, including sermon series, what those might be, and what those titles might be, including like maybe the sermon like verses. It's just incredibly helpful if you can do that as a church.
Yeah, good. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much for your time. Let me ask you one more just off the wall question as we leave. I've been, both of us have been a lot in VR, doing VR stuff. What do you think about, and this may not apply to many people, but the people that does apply for it, it hits pretty strong. What do you think about AltSpace VR going away?
Oh, I just heard about that actually. So I was pretty sad to hear that was going away.
Me too.
I'm bummed, I guess. I don't know. That's a good question. I think that like there's so many like different VR spaces that are coming and going. And so I'm excited to see what the future holds for all of them.
Yeah, I think a lot of there's definitely going to be some churches that are in VR that are going to have to move to other spaces, VR chat, big screen, places like that. But we got some episodes in the queue with Jeff Reed, and we had one last year with DJ Soto and Jason Poling, just to kind of get a view on what's to come and be ready for that. So just kind of dropping that for folks who are interested. Well, your book, everybody needs to go get it. It is the definitive book on church communications. I'm so glad that you put it on paper and put all this stuff and really define the terms for us. And I think that you treated stuff in a way that doesn't make me feel like I'm an idiot if I'm at a church and I don't know stuff, you know what I mean? And so you really did it in a way that could help people no matter where they are. So I appreciate that about what you've done.
Thank you. When I was writing it, I was thinking about teaching my 18-year-old college students.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what will they know? And they won't know anything. So I was like, how can I speak to them specifically about it? And so that is who I really wrote it for, was like a college student or seminary student. So
yeah, you did a great job. People can pick it up on Amazon. Is there and anywhere books are sold, but is there a website you want folks to go to?
Well, Amazon's great. It's sold by Lifeway. I think that you might get a better deal if you go through the Lifeway website. And I know too, like the shipping is apparently more reliable than Amazon, which is very interesting, but sure. Yeah. And so, you can also go through the Lifeway website as well.
Okay, awesome. Katie, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
At 1230 Media, we want to help you make Sunday happen. That's why we're creating hundreds of mini movies for you to download straight to your presentation software to use in your worship experiences. These are short videos that can be used as worship service openers, sermon bumpers, or transitional elements. We have videos for every holiday. We have videos on books of the Bible, baptism, communion, and more. All to help you level up your worship experience and help people encounter Jesus. It's all in the library at 1230.media. That's 1230.media. Hey guys, got a bonus segment of the podcast for you today. As you know, we do a 5 questions segment toward the end of our interview on some of our podcasts, and I thought it'd be fun to pull one out from the archives. Today, it's evangelist Nick Hall. He is an author, speaker. He's a protege of Greg Laurie and Billy Graham and others. He's an evangelist of our time, and I interviewed him a few months back, and we had so much fun doing a 5 questions together. So I wanted to share that with you. So check this out, and I'll be back in just a minute to wrap things up. All right, number 1, what is the biggest risk that you've ever taken in ministry?
Biggest risk I've ever taken in ministry. We, felt like God was calling us to book the National Mall and call for 1 million people to come and raise $10 million. And we had never done an event for like 5,000 people and had never raised like $500,000. And so that was either like God or just incredibly stupid, but that was a big one. I would tell you we had probably 300,000 people come out. We nearly went broke like a ton of times, but God provided everything we needed. It wasn't $10 million, but he provided everything we needed. And it changed my life.
Yeah. Awesome, man. All right. This one's out of left field. Ready? All right. Name the word from this definition. Ready? A strong, regular beating or throbbing resulting from the regular widening of an artery in the body as blood flows through it. This has to do with you.
Name the definition?
Or name the word. Looking for
Pulse.
the word. You got it. That's right. Very good. Very good. All right, number 3. What's something that you wish you were better at?
I wish I was better at sitting still and just being, just sitting still and meditating on scripture. It's hard. It is perpetually hard for me to sit still. I'm a doer.
Good.
So I want to be more like Mary. Sit at the feet.
Ponder. All right. Number 4, what's a TV show that you're embarrassed to say that you watch?
Embarrassed to say that I watch.
Guilty pleasure.
I don't know if I'm embarrassed of anything. My wife and I have been watching Inventing Anna. I think it's the Netflix show about the heiress who is, she faked to be New York elite, and it's super fascinating. I don't think I'm embarrassed about it, but I mean, in some ways, I guess I should be embarrassed. I probably should be embarrassed. I know way too much Paw Patrol and what else? What's the Daniel Tiger? And I can sing every song. I know every character. That's embarrassing, but maybe it also means I'm a good dad because my kids just can't get enough of it. So
there you go. Daniel Tiger. Did you see the Mr. Rogers documentary?
So good.
It was good.
So good.
The Tom Hanks movie.
The documentary was way better than the Tom Hanks movie.
I think so too.
Yeah, that Tom Hanks movie got a little weird. It was a little artsy for me.
It was a little well, when it started out with like a picture of like dude in a bloody nose, I was like, where's this going?
Yeah, there was some creative liberties that were there. The documentary, man, I cried.
Yeah, it was really good. Really good. Especially with the gay guy that
super inspiring.
So
the black guy, the gay guy, all of it. It just was.
Yeah. Well, the amount.
The amount of thought. Well, I'm just saying the amount of thought that he put into just intention. Like you never would have. If I hadn't watched that, I always just thought he just put on like silly kids programs. But like when you saw that he was like a family pastor.
Yeah.
And like just family human development and like caring about the spiritual well-being. It just was really like, wow, this guy was like another level.
Yeah. Well, the fact that I forget what his name was, the gay guy, that came out and said, how much he listened to him, how much he cared about him. Like, this is a dude that he disagreed with his lifestyle, but the dude knew that he loved him. Interesting. All right, last question for you. What is one thing that if churches would focus on, they would see their impact with the next generation grow significantly?
Man, that is a tough to pick one. I think I'm just going to say prayer. I just think that we can have all the strategies in the world, but until we're desperate for the Lord, which really is embodied by the priority of prayer. And I think these kids want to pray, man. They want to pray. They love a prayer meeting. They can pray all night long. And so I think that's what I'd say.
Good. Awesome. Well, man, thank you so much for the time. Tell us how we can learn about Pulse, how we can learn about the Together event.
Yeah, pulse.org is kind of all things there, and both about the ministry and about Together. And if people have questions or want to reach out, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff. So, reach out, hit me with a message. And we just, love the church, really thankful. Want to encourage all the pastors or ministry leaders out there, like, don't grow weary in doing good. It's so easy to think you're not significant because you're not doing things as big as somebody else. And that's just a lie from the pit of hell. Like and one life, my life was changed by a pastor that nobody knew. And, never will have any accolade, never will be celebrated. Just a humble, faithful man of God. And so, I just want to encourage you, man, press in. And, there's somebody out there whose life's going to be changed, and it's worth it all. So
good. Well, Nick, pleasure getting to know you, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Honored by the time.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out this week. Be sure to subscribe to our show on YouTube or Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, and share the episodes if you would, especially if you like them, if your pastor likes them, or if you are a pastor and want to share it with your team. Please feel free to do so on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever you share your social media. You can also email me at carl@1230.media. That's all spelled out, carl@1230.media. If you have questions or comments, I've gotten some great emails over the last few weeks with you guys kind of writing in and giving suggestions for guests and topics and comments. So keep them coming, carl@1230.media. You can also find our show at makingsundayhappen.com. It's makingsundayhappen.com. Well, next week on the show, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of ChatGPT. It's been around for a few months to the public, and the speed of AI is moving incredibly fast. If you missed our bonus episode with Rob Lauder and Jason Moore on AI imagery and using Midjourney, feel free to check that out. Very interesting stuff. But next week, I'm talking with Alex Lyons, who's the creative director at the South Carolina Baptist Convention. Alex has a lot of great tips on using ChatGPT. I'll also welcome Ryan Frank. Ryan is the founder of Kids Matter and just did a webinar for kids ministry leaders on tips for ChatGPT and how to use it effectively for ministry to save you tons of time and to help you. Full episode on ChatGPT next week. We'll go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.